Imagine that we were able to control space or control time. The kinds of things that we'd be able to do would be amazing. I might be able to go from here to here, to here, to here, and over to here in only an instant. Now, we all think that this kind of trip would be impossible, and it probably is. But in the last few years, our ideas about the true nature of space and time have been going through some changes, and things that used to seem like science fiction are looking not so far-fetched. It's all thanks to a revolution in physics called string theory, which is offering a whole new perspective on the inner workings of the universe.
String theory holds out the promise that we can really understand questions of why the universe is the way it is at the most fundamental level.
String theory is really the Wild West of physics.
This is an area of theoretical physics which is so radically different from anything that's been before.
This radical new theory starts with a simple premise that everything in the universe, the Earth, these buildings, even forces like gravity and electricity, are made up of incredibly tiny, vibrating strands of energy called strings. And small as they are, strings are changing everything we thought we knew about the universe, especially our ideas about the nature of space. To see how, let's first shrink all of space to a more manageable size. Imagine that the whole universe consisted of nothing more than my hometown, Manhattan. So now, just one borough of New York City makes up the entire fabric of space. And just for kicks, let's also imagine that I'm the CEO of a large corporation with offices on Wall Street. Because time is money, I need to find the quickest route from my apartment here in Upper Manhattan to my offices in Lower Manhattan. Now, we all know that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but even if there's no traffic, a bit of a stretch, even in our imaginary Manhattan, it'll still take us some amount of time to get there. By going faster and faster, we can reduce the travel time, but because nothing can go faster than the speed of light, there's a definite limit to how much time we can cut from our journey. This Manhattan universe fits with an old classical vision of space. Basically, a flat grid that's static and unchanging. But when Albert Einstein looked at the fabric of space, he saw something completely different. He said that space wasn't static. It could warp and stretch. And there could even be unusual structures of space, called wormholes. A wormhole is a bridge or a tunnel that can link distant regions of space. In effect, a cosmic shortcut. In this kind of universe, my commute would be a New Yorker's dream. But there's a hitch. To create a wormhole, you've got to rip or tear a hole in the fabric of space. But can the fabric of space really rip? Can this first step toward forming a wormhole actually happen? Well, you can't answer these questions on an empty stomach. Turns out that by looking at my breakfast, coffee and a donut, we can get a pretty good sense of what string theory says about whether the fabric of space can tear. Imagine that space is shaped like this donut. You might think that it would be very different from a region of space shaped like this coffee cup. But there's a precise sense in which the shape of the donut and the coffee cup are actually the same, just a little disguised. You see, they both have one hole. In the donut, it's in the middle, and in the coffee cup, it's in the handle. That means we can change the donut into the shape of a coffee cup and back again without having to rip or tear the dough at all. Okay, but suppose you want to change the shape of this donut into a very different shape, a shape with no holes. The only way to do that is to tear the donut like this, and then reshape it. Unfortunately, according to Einstein's laws, this is impossible. They say that space can stretch and warp, but it cannot rip. Wormholes might exist somewhere fully formed, but you could not rip space to create a new one over Manhattan or anywhere else. In other words, I can't take a wormhole to work. But now, string theory is giving us a whole new perspective on space, and it's showing us that Einstein wasn't always right. To see how, let's take a much closer look at the spatial fabric. If we could shrink down to about 1/millionth of a billionth of our normal size, we'd enter the world of quantum mechanics. The laws that control how atoms behave. It's the world of light and electricity and everything else that operates at the smallest of scales. Here, the fabric of space is random and chaotic. Rips and tears might be commonplace. But if they were, what would stop a rip in the fabric of space from creating a cosmic catastrophe? Well, this is where the power of strings comes in. Strings calm the chaos. And as a single string dances through space, it sweeps out a tube. The tube can act like a bubble that surrounds the tear, a protective shield with profound implications. Strings actually make it possible for space to rip. Which means that space is far more dynamic and changeable than even Albert Einstein thought. So, does that mean that wormholes are possible? Will I ever be able to take a stroll on Everest? Grab a baguette in Paris? And still make it back to New York in time for my morning meeting? It would be kind of cool, though it's still a very distant possibility. But one thing that is certain is that string theory is already showing us that the universe may be a lot stranger than any of us ever imagined. For example, string theory says we're surrounded by hidden dimensions, mysterious places beyond the familiar three-dimensional space we know.
People who've said that there are extra dimensions of space have been labeled as, crackpots or people who are bananas. I mean, what do you think there are extra dimensions? Well, string theory really predicts it.
What we think of as our universe could just be one small part of something much bigger.
Perhaps we live on a membrane, a three-dimensional membrane that floats inside a higher dimensional space.
There could be entire worlds right next to us, but completely invisible.
These other worlds would, in a very literal sense, be parallel universes. This isn't a particularly exotic or strange notion.
No wonder physics students are lining up to explore the strange world of string theory.
String theory is very active. Things are happening. There are a lot of people doing it. Most of the young kids, given the choice, at a ratio of something like 10 to 1, they will go into string theory.
But strings weren't always this popular. The pioneers of string theory struggled for years, working alone on an idea that nobody else believed in. Here's the gist of it. For decades, physicists believed that the tiniest bits inside an atom were point particles. Flying around the outside were the electrons, and inside were protons and neutrons, which were made up of quarks. But string theory says that what we thought were indivisible particles are actually tiny vibrating strings.
It's nothing really mystical. It's a really tiny string. It either closes into its little circle or it has endpoints, but it's just a little string.
In the 1980s, the idea caught on, and people started jumping on the string bandwagon.
Well, the fact that suddenly all these other people were working in the field had its advantages and its disadvantages. It was wonderful to see how rapidly the subject could develop now because so many people were working on it.
One of the great attractions of strings is their versatility. Just as the strings on a cello can vibrate at different frequencies, making all the individual musical notes, in the same way, the tiny strings of string theory vibrate and dance in different patterns, creating all the fundamental particles of nature. If this view is right, then put them all together and we get the grand and beautiful symphony that is our universe. What's really exciting about this is that it offers an amazing possibility. If we could only master the rhythms of strings, then we'd stand a good chance of explaining all the matter and all the forces of nature, from the tiniest subatomic particles to the galaxies of outer space. This is the potential of string theory, to be a unified theory of everything. But at first sight, in our enthusiasm for this idea, we seem to have gone too far. Because we didn't produce just one string theory, or even two. We somehow managed to come up with 5.
5 different string theories, each competing for the title of the theory of everything.
And if there's going to be the fundamental theory of nature, there ought to be one of them.
I suppose a number of string theorists thought, oh, that's fantastic, that's wonderful, and maybe one of these will end up being the right theory of the world. And yet there must have been a little nagging voice at the back of their head that said, well, why are there 5?
With 5 competing players, the stage of string theory was looking a little crowded. The 5 theories had many things in common. For example, they all involved vibrating strings, but their mathematical details appeared to be quite different. Frankly, it was embarrassing. How could this unified theory of everything come in 5 different flavors? This was a case where more was definitely less. But then, something remarkable happened. This is Ed Witten. He's widely regarded as one of the world's greatest living physicists, perhaps even Einstein's successor.
Ed Witten is a very special person in the field. He clearly has a grasp, particularly of the underlying mathematical principles, which is far greater than most other people.
Well, you know, we all think we're very smart, and he's so much smarter than the rest of us.
In 1995, string theorists from all over the world gathered at the University of Southern California for their annual conference. Ed Witten showed up at Strings 95 and rocked their world.
I was really trying to think of something that would be significant for the occasion. And actually, since 5 string theories was too many, I thought I would try to get rid of some of them.
To solve the problem, Witten constructed a spectacular new way of looking at string theory.
Ed announced that he had thought about it, and moreover, he had solved it. He was going to tell us the solution to every string theory in every dimension, which was an enormous claim. But coming from Ed, it was not so surprising.
The atmosphere was electric because all of a sudden, string theory, which had been going through kind of doldrums, was given an incredible boost, a shot in the arm.
Ed Witten gave his famous lecture, and he said a couple of words that got me interested. And for the rest of the lecture, I got hooked up on the first few words that he said and completely missed the point of his lecture.
I remember I had to give the talk after him, and I was kind of embarrassed.
Ed Witten just blew everybody away.
Ed Witten blew everybody away because he provided a completely new perspective on string theory. From this point of view, we could see that there weren't really 5 different theories. Like reflections in a wall of mirrors, what we thought were 5 theories turned out to be just 5 different ways of looking at the same thing. String theory was unified at last.
Witten's work sparked a breakthrough so revolutionary that it was given its own name, M-theory, although no one really knows what the M stands for.
What is the M for?
M-theory.
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 M-theory is a theory.
I don't actually know what the M stands for.
Well, the M has...
I've heard many descriptions.
Mystery theory, magic theory.
It's the mother theory.
Matrix theory.
Monstrous theory. I don't know what Ed meant.
M stands for magic, mystery, or matrix, according to taste.
I suspect that the M is an upside-down W for Witten.
Some cynics have occasionally suggested that M may also stand for murky, because our level of understanding of the theory is in fact so primitive. Maybe I shouldn't have told you that one.
Whatever the name, it was a bombshell. Suddenly, everything was different.
There was a lot of panic, if you like, realizing that big things were happening and all of us not wanting to get left behind in this new revolution of string theory.
After Witten's talk, there was renewed hope that this one theory could be the theory to explain everything in the universe. But there was also a price to pay. Before M-theory, strings seemed to operate in a world with 10 dimensions. These included 1 dimension of time, the 3 familiar space dimensions, as well as 6 extra dimensions, curled up so tiny that they're completely invisible.
Well, we think these extra dimensions exist because they come out of the equations of string theory. Strings need to move in more than 3 dimensions. And that was a shock to everybody, but then we learned to live with it.
But M-theory would go even further, demanding yet another spatial dimension, bringing the grand total to 11 dimensions.
We know that there would have to be 11 dimensions for this theory to make sense. So there must be 11 dimensions. We only see 3 plus 1 of them. How is that possible?
For most of us, it's virtually impossible to picture the extra higher dimensions. I can't. And it's not surprising. Our brains evolved sensing just the 3 spatial dimensions of everyday experience. So, how can we get a feel for them? One way is to go to the movies. We're all familiar with the real world having 3 spatial dimensions. That is, anywhere I go, I can move left, right, back, forth, or up, down. But in the movies, things are a bit different. Even though the characters on a movie screen look three-dimensional, they actually are stuck in just two dimensions. There is no back-forth on a movie screen. That's just an optical illusion. To really move in the back-forth dimension, I'd have to step out of the screen. And sometimes, moving into a higher dimension can be a useful thing to do. So, dimensions all have to do with the independent directions in which you can move. They're sometimes called degrees of freedom. The more dimensions or degrees of freedom you have, the more you can do. That's right. And if there really are 11 dimensions, then strings can do a lot more too.
People found fairly soon that there were objects that lived in these theories, which weren't just strings, but were larger than that. They actually looked like membranes or surfaces.
The extra dimension Witten added allows a string to stretch into something like a membrane, or a brain for short. A brain could be three-dimensional, or even more. And with enough energy, a brain could grow to an enormous size, perhaps even as large as a universe. This was a revolution in string theory.
String theory has gotten much more baroque. I mean, now there are not only strings, there are membranes. People go on calling this string theory, but the string theorists are not sure it really is a theory of strings anymore.
The existence of giant membranes and extra dimensions would open up a startling new possibility. That our whole universe is living on a membrane inside a much larger, higher dimensional space. It's almost as if we were living inside a loaf of bread. Our universe might be like a slice of bread, just one slice in a much larger loaf that physicists sometimes call the bulk.